Welcome to the second video. We continue this series of playthrough videos by taking the second player turn of the game, which is the EU here, the blue cylinder. And as with the US in the previous video, we start with a drawing of a development event. We've got Saakashvili coming up during next turn. It's not a card that overrides the currently revealed card, so that will occur instead. Saakashvili is entering play next turn. And so the card that we have here now is called Neutral Action. This is where the neutrals, so-called neutrals, third parties, not player side forces here enter play and become active. This refers to these counters here brought into play by world events. Here, for instance, the Syrian civil war has brought 2 levels of militant neutral influence here into Levant, this space over here. Now this counter will spring into action and contest the influence here either of Russia, political influence here, red for Russia at level 1, or also at level 1 US political influence, the green octagon. We will select the target randomly since the level of influence is equal here. If one was higher, then that would be the target. Rolling the white die here, 1, 2, 3 selects Russia, 4, 5, 6 the US, and 1, 2, 3 it's Russia. Russia will conduct now or face a contest from the neutrals, and so it's a die roll based thing. Both sides will roll 1d6, then add the current level of influence in the space. So in the case of the neutrals, that will be a +2. For the Russians, just +1. So the neutrals have a comparative advantage of +1. Russia, however, being a player side, is able and allowed to spend resources for die roll modifiers, and so they will spend say 2 resources, so going +1 ahead in the overall balance of die roll modifiers. And now I roll then the white die for the neutrals. It's a 6, and the Russians get a 4, +1 is 5. It's less than the neutrals, so that means the Russians will actually lose their political influence in the space. That's a pretty significant loss. And further consequences are placing of a tension marker here at level 1, and that's it. Now we will soon talk about that tension marker in the connection of the Arab Spring, but first we continue with the EU turn. So now going into the opportunity segment, the EU is not able to resolve any opportunities here at the game start, so we proceed to the command segment. For the EU command segment, we head into the EU hand window, and this is the starting hand we've drawn for them. So once again, as with the United States, you nominate a suit. The EU will select to nominate the political suit and play as many cards as they desire or want, or can play. So let's play these 2. And also in the connection of this suit, we apply consequences. The consequence from excessive political action is a terror threat increase in the EU home space, increasing here to level 2. And then the EU proceeds to play these cards. So now this political suit card here, the rule of law mechanism, has a so-called momentum effect here. It's the text here on the purple against the purple background saying influence grows. So this is a momentum effect that means if the EU uses this card to take control in a space, then they will immediately earn the right to play a second command during this during their turn. So, and the the EU will take advantage of this. Let's see, where can they establish control. I can see two spaces with existing EU political influence, which would be here necessary. So we can do this here in North Africa, or we can do it in Central Asia. And so let's say the EU will increase political influence here in North Africa. So what is happening here is the EU is using this card here for a corresponding for an action corresponding to the suit of the card, which is to increase political influence. There's always a space selection cost that the EU pays, so they reduce their resources from 6 to 5. And the action then is to increase political influence in the space, and this activates the momentum effect. So we remember, once we've concluded the first command of the EU turn, that the EU may play a second command. So more of that soon. So that card has been used. We may discard it already. That leaves the second card here. And so let's say the EU uses this card not for the suit and the associated action, but for the event option, which is here against the green background. It simply has some flavor text to it. It says steady centrism of Angela Merkel, and here the icon is the more important one. The icon shows us that by taking this event option, the card may be turned into its sideways orientation, which brings the reaction ability of the card into play. Using the card in this orientation also means it needs to be, or it must be placed in a theater on the map. Theater is refers to the set of spaces, like for instance Europe is one theater, Asia is one, and so on. So now the EU will place this reaction ability in, I think, here in Europe. Here you can see the slots along the top edge. There are 3 slots for cards for Europe, 3 for Asia, and so for each theater on the map. I will talk about reactions later on when this becomes relevant. So that was already the second EU card played, and so we go into the we conclude that command, but you remember the momentum effect gave EU a second command, so they may now nominate a second suit and proceed to play those cards. I will now nominate the cultural suit, since the EU holds 2 of those, and play these 2 cards. The cultural suit is a bit different than the rest of the other suits in that it doesn't have any consequences. So the EU can simply play these worry-free. Let's see what we can do with this. So we will probably just use this card here to increase the EU. So again, we use the card for its suit and a corresponding action. One action corresponding to the cultural suit is to increase the world order contribution as measured here on the world order track. EU will increase its contribution by 1. Taking that action again involves selecting a space, or in this case a track, so that calls the space selection. That involves paying the space selection cost of 1 resource, so reducing to 4. That card has been used. Remains the second one to be used. With this, the EU will place a civil society marker in a space where they have presence, and let that marker be here in the Balkans. This is the space over here, so we drop a civil society marker there. That caused also the space selection cost, and what these markers here do is, so the civil society marker helps shift the governance type of space. So for instance, the EU home space here has the governance type of a democratic. Russia, for instance, has a governance type of authoritarian, and then many other spaces on the map have the printed sort of neutral or transitory governance type. And the catch here is that when you change the governance type of a space, then the war of ideas track here will shift either towards the democracies, which is the parliament symbol or icon here, or towards authoritarian end, which is the lock symbol also featured on these counters. And if the track shifts too far in either end, then each of the powers, player sides, that is, of a particular ideology, they begin to earn victory points. So for instance, if the mark shifted here to the authoritarian end, then both authoritarian powers in the game, that is Russia and China, would earn 1 victory point each. So placing civil society is a way of fighting the war of ideas. Conversely, placing tension markers is a way of shifting the track towards the authoritarian end. Okay, so, and that's what the EU have done with the second card. All right, and that ends the EU commands segment. We go into the planning. So once again, as with the US, EU may include a card into their hand. We will include, I think, the counterterrorism coordination event, because it allows us to try to turn terror threat into an additional command. So basically we get to play more cards. So we drop that into the discard pile and eventually we'll enter the EU hand. The last step remaining is to draw the EU hand to 4 cards, and that concludes the EU turn.